Welcome, QUS friends. As Nelson hinted to in his first sermon within the Liturgies that Form a series, we are asking, as a response to our series, that everyone create a rule of life. Now, this is something that we'll be developing as we go through the series, and maybe the final form of it will be happening and put in place at the end of the series. So this is an older term that Nelson and I would really like to reclaim. And a rule of life is simply a pattern of communal habits for formation. And to best frame this, I want to share the way that Justin Earley speaks about them in his book, The Common Rule. This is a book that I've referenced in sermons previously, and you can expect me to reference it in the upcoming sermons within this series as well. The most well-known rules of life were originally developed by church fathers and ancient monastics, such as St. Augustine or St. Benedict. For thousands of years, spiritual communities have been using the frame of the rule of life as a mechanism of communal formation. Despite our understanding of the word rule, a rule of life is much less about obeying rules than it is about finding communal purpose. For example, while both St. Augustine's and St. Benedict's rule have all kinds of tiny habits that we might either consider too inane to matter or too strict to be appropriate, we should notice that both of them had the same goal in mind: love. Both were obsessed with taking the small patterns of life and organizing them towards the big goal of life, to love God and neighbor. St. Augustine's rule began with this sentence: "Before all things, most dear brothers and sisters, we must love God and after him our neighbor. For these are the principal commands which have been given to us." St. Benedict's rule opens declaring that it means to establish nothing harsh, nothing burdensome, but goes on to describe walking in God's commandments as being in the ineffable sweetness of love. Both saw habits as the gears by which to direct life toward the purpose of love. In fact, the word rule is used because it comes from the Latin word regula, a word associated with a bar or trellis, the woodwork on which a plant grows. The idea is that we, like plants, are always growing and changing, but when there is no order, growth can take something that was supposed to produce fruit and turn it into a twisted vine of decay. That description was always frighteningly accurate in my case. The rule of life is intended to pattern communal life in the direction of purpose and love instead of chaos and decay. So I hope sharing that kind of takes the fear or stress out of the term rule of life. And I wanted to end this video with 3 tips as we begin the work of developing a rule of life. The first is to just start small. Like any good workout routine, we want to start small. If silence and solitude is hard for you, just start with 5 minutes and work your way up as things become more comfortable. If Sabbath is new to you, then just start with a couple or several hours of Sabbath instead of a full 24 hours. Spiritual formation is supposed to grow into our life as we adjust to our new practices. So once your rule of life begins to feel like your new normal, begin adding more time into some practices or adding more practices. Secondly, do it and develop it in community. We were never meant to figure out this whole journey with Jesus alone. And it might be hard to practice Sabbath if other people in your community are keeping Sabbath on a different day. It can be lonely to practice solitude and silence if we think we're the only ones doing it, or we don't have people to process our findings when we engage in it. So work with your missional fellowship or other close friends as you begin to experiment with practices. Maybe your community will develop words for a prayer that you say every morning or every evening. In my missional fellowship, we've been trying to put our hands to structuring our day in 3 times of prayer: beginning, middle, and end of day. And for us, we've been calling the middle of the day prayer halftime. And it's just been a fun, silly thing for us, but it helps remind us that we're not doing this because we have to. We're doing this because we want to. Lastly, commit your rule of life to paper and then commit to changing it. It's good for us to put things to paper as it increases our ownership of new practices and it helps us visualize how this is going to fit into our week. But also don't feel compelled to not shift things around as you experience them. We're experimenting. Move your Sabbath to a different day or consider practicing Sabbath from Saturday evening to Sunday evening so that you have the evening to prepare for Monday. Move silence and solitude to after work if mornings are a drag for you. This way you can transition well into home life. The big thing to remember here is that we master our rule of life. Our rule of life does not master us. So I hope this helps, and I ask that we help each other. Let's make it normal to ask how our development of a rule of life is on a Sunday morning. Let's help each other take steps toward growth, not legalism, and direct people to this video if you found it helpful for yourself. Thanks, everybody.